Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters. I'm your host Mitch, glad to have you here. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about Commander on a budget. Today's episode is going to be a $50 deck tech. When I say $50, I mean that is an overall deck cost. Both shipping and commanders that are $10 or less are going to be included in that cost, but basic lands will not be. Decks on this channel are built to be fun, inexpensive, and focused. If you want to learn more about what a focused commander deck is, check out this video here. On this deck tech, I'm going to take you through its strategy, the tactics, and how this deck wins. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. And while you're at it, subscribe and review our podcast as well. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCGplayer affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Today's episode comes to you courtesy of Dakota. Dakota is a Golden Pig tier patron of the channel and has been supporting the channel for over a year now. I truly couldn't do this without amazing patrons like Dakota. And today, Dakota's going to handle the intro for me.
G'day Mitch, this is Dakota here, coming in from Australia. For my deck tech, I would like to see you build around your choice of Bruna, the Fading Light, or Gisela, the Broken Blade, in order to form Brisela, Voice of Nightmares. The reason why I would like to see you try this is mono white is a difficult color to build with in Commander, as well as the fact of Brisela being really freaking cool and also very hard to deal with on a board in Commander. Have fun, and let's see you do some magic with this.
So like Dakota said, I've got the choice of building between either Bruna or Gisela. Let's take a look at the two creatures first before I tell you which one I picked. Bruna the Fading Light is a 5/7 angel horror that costs 5 white. It says when you cast Bruna the Fading Light, you may return target angel or human creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it's got flying and vigilance. And of course, it melds with Gisela the Broken Blade. She's a 4/3 angel horror with flying, first strike, and lifelink that costs 2 white. She has the beginning of your end step if you both own and control Gisela the Broken Blade and a creature named Bruna the Fading Light, exile them, then meld them into Brisela, Voice of Nightmares. So before we get into Brisela, again, we need to pick one of the two since they aren't partner commanders. The one that I chose to build around was Bruna for multiple reasons. If we happen to get Gisela out and she dies, we can get her back with Bruna. And also, that kind of reanimation can really help us with card advantage, too. As Dakota mentioned, mono white is a difficult color to build around in Commander, so we need all the ways to generate card advantage that we can get. Anyways, though, after we get both these onto the battlefield, they meld. And again, they're going to meld into Brisela, Voice of Nightmares. Brisela is a 9/10 Eldrazi angel with flying, first strike, vigilance, and lifelink. It also has your opponents can't cast spells with converted mana cost of 3 or less. So Brisela is not only a huge threat, but it can also really shut down opponents. Not allowing our opponents to cast certain spells can really throw a wrench into their plans. So what's our strategy for this deck? We're going to loot and mill ourselves until Gisela is in our graveyard. Again, mono white decks really struggle at drawing cards, so we can generate some card advantage in a different way by looting and milling ourselves. When Gisela's in our graveyard, we cast Bruna and we get her back to meld. And then how we win with this deck is pretty straightforward. We're going to either 1 or 2 shot each of our opponents with Brisela. Brisela starts off at 9 power, and we've got plenty of ways to pump her to get her power even higher. As with all Commander's Quarters decks, I'm going to take you through 10 different tactics that show you how the deck works and how we're going to win with it. So let's start things off with tact number 1, Rock Concert. First up, there's Wayfarer's Ball, which we can pay 2 and tap and sacrifice it to get a basic land and play tapped. Next up, we've got some colorless mana rocks with Guardian Idol, Prismatic Lens, and Mind Stone. Guardian Idol enters the battlefield tapped, but we can make it into a 2/2 by paying 2. And then Prismatic Lens can also help us filter our mana. And by paying 1 and tapping and sacrificing Mind Stone, we can draw a card. Next up, there's Star Compass, which comes into play tapped and is going to tap for a white for this stack. And then we've got 3 mana rocks that each tap for 2 with Warren Power Stone, Sisay's Ring, and Urgolem's Eye. Warren Power Stone only costs 3, but it does enter the battlefield tapped, whereas Sisay's Ring and Urgolem's Eye each cost 4 and come into play untapped. Next up, there's Firemind Vessel, which comes into play tapped, and we can tap for 2 mana of different colors. And finally, we've got some mana rocks that can draw us multiple cards with Hedron Archive and Dreamstone Hedron. Hedron Archive can tap for 2, and we can pay 2 and tap it to sacrifice it and draw 2 cards. And then Dreamstone Hedron does the exact same thing, but everything is 3 instead of 2. But after we've ramped, we want to start milling ourselves. So let's move on to tactic number 2, Yard Sale. First up, we've got Milliken and Charm Pendant, which can help us ramp and mill. Milliken has tap, put the top card of your library into your graveyard, add colors to your mana pool. And then Charm Pendant has tap, put the top card of your library into your graveyard for each colored mana symbol in that card's mana cost, add 1 mana of that color, activate this ability only anytime you can cast an instant. Next up, we've got some cards that don't ramp us but do help us mill with Ghoulcaller's Bell, Wand of Vertebrae, and Codex Shredder. By tapping Ghoulcaller's Bell, we mill each player by 1. By tapping Wand of Vertebrae, we put the top card of our library into our graveyard. And by paying 2 and tapping and exiling it, we shuffle up to 5 target cards from our graveyard into our library. Next up, there's Codex Predator, which we can tap to make target player put the top card of their library into their graveyard, and we can pay 5 and tap and sacrifice it to return target card from our graveyard to our hand. And then we're running Shriekhorn, which comes in play with 3 charge counters on it. By tapping it and removing a charge counter from it, we mill target player by 2. Next up, there's Perpetual Timepiece, which we can tap to mill ourselves by 2. And by paying 2 and exiling it, we can shuffle any number of target cards from our graveyard into our library. Millstone might be a little more mana intensive, but it can still be very effective in the stack. By paying 2 and tapping it, we make target player mill 2. Again, if these mill cards target a player, we're always going to choose us. This deck really wants to get Gisela into play, and by getting her into our graveyard, we're halfway there. So we're also running Whetstone and Worry Beads. With Whetstone, by paying 3, we mill everyone for 2. And then Worry Bead says at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. Some bigger ways to mill ourselves come with Sands of Delirium and Grind Clock. Sands of Delirium has pay X, target player puts the top X cards of their library into their graveyard. And then by tapping Grind Clock, we can put a charge counter on it. And then we can tap and target player puts the top X cards of their library into their graveyard, where X is the number of charge counters on Grind Clock. And finally, there's Clock of Omens, which is a fantastic card in this deck. It says tap 2 untapped artifacts you control, untap target artifact. So essentially this can allow all of our artifacts to help mill or ramp depending on what we have in play. Outside of milling though, we can also loot to dig for Gisela. So now let's move on to tactic number 3, Loot Crate. First up, there's Key to the City, which serves a dual purpose in this deck. By tapping it and discarding a card, we make target creature unblockable until end of turn. And then when it becomes untapped, we can pay 2 and draw a card. So this can make our commander unblockable on top of helping us loot. Next up, we've got some more artifacts that can help us loot with Urza's Tome, Jalem Tome, and an Emissai Tome. Urza's Tome has pay 3 and tap it to draw a card, then discard a card unless you exile a store card from your graveyard. And then Jalem Tome has pay 2 and tap it to draw a card and discard a card. And by paying 5 and tapping Emissai Tome, we draw 2 cards and discard a card. Finally, Thran Tome is slightly different since it has pay 5, tap and reveal the top 3 cards of your library, target opponent chooses one of those cards, put that card into your graveyard, then draw 2 cards. For this deck's purposes, Gisela can be effective in both our graveyard and our hand. But now that we've tackled some ways to get her into our graveyard, let's talk about some ways to get her into our hand. So it's time to move on to tactic number 4, Draw Down. First up, there's Lore Seeker Stone, which we can pay 3 and tap to draw 3 cards, but this ability costs 1 more to activate for each card in our hand. In a mono-white deck especially, this can be a fantastic way to draw some cards. Another way comes with Sandstone Oracle. It has when it enters the battlefield, we choose an opponent, and if that player has more cards in hand than us, we draw cards equal to the difference. Since we're playing mono-white, chances are an opponent's going to have a lot more cards than we do. But outside of milling, looting, and drawing, we've got some even more effective ways of getting Gisela. So let's go through them now in tactic number 5, Calling All Angels. First up, there's Skyship Weatherlight, which when it comes into play, we search our library for any number of artifact and or creature cards and exile them, then we shuffle our library. By paying 4 and tapping it, then we choose a card at random that was exiled with it, and we put that card into its owner's hand. So this is a somewhat risky way to get Gisela since we're actually exiling her first to get her. If someone destroys this before we can activate it, we lose Gisela forever. We can also just use this though to clear out all the artifacts in our library if we want to. That might be the safer approach and help us thin out our deck to make sure that we hit Gisela. A safer way to tutor for her though comes with Ring of 3 Wishes. It comes into play with 3 wish counters on it, and we can pay 5 and tap to remove a wish counter from it, and then we can search our library for a card and put that card into our hand. So essentially for 8 mana in total, we can get Gisela. A more delayed but cheaper approach comes with Tamio's Journal. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, investigate. And then we can tap it to sacrifice 3 clues and search our library for a card and put that card into our hand, then we shuffle our library. So if we're impatient, we can sacrifice those clues earlier to draw some cards, or we can just wait and then tutor. But the best way for us to tutor in this deck comes with our Golden Pig. The Golden Pig of our deck is the number 1 card out of our 99. And the Golden Pig for this deck is Thalia's Lancers. It's a 4/4 human knight with first strike that costs 3 white. When it enters the battlefield, you search your library for a legendary card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So simply put, this is a tutor that gets us Gisela for 5 mana. That's a fantastic deal for a deck that's trying to do anything and everything that it can do to get Gisela. On top of that, because this is a human, our commander can reanimate it. So if we either mill or loot this, we can cast Bruna and then reanimate this, and then it comes into play and its ETB triggers. And then as soon as we can cast Gisela, we can meld them together. Thalia's Lancers gets us the card that we want for a reasonable price, and that's why it's the Golden Pig. But as we're trying to get to Gisela, our opponents aren't just going to be sitting on their hands. So let's go through some ways to slow them down in tactic number 6, Clear Things Up. We're going to be running quite a few wraths in this deck, including Slaughter the Strong, Divine Reckoning, and Single Combat. Slaughter the Strong says each player chooses any number of creatures they control with total power of 4 or less and sacrifices all other creatures they control. Divine Reckoning says each player chooses a creature they control, destroy the rest, and it's got flashback for 5 white. And Single Combat says each player chooses a creature or planeswalker they control, then sacrifices the rest. Players can't cast creatures or planeswalker spells until the end of your next turn. Keep in mind that we have to be careful when we cast Single Combat because it affects us as well. And then we're running Mass Calcify, which is going to destroy all non-white creatures. This can really come in handy, especially if we have to cast Gisela or Bruna before we want to. And finally, we're running Chronomantic Escape, which isn't a wrath, but it can really come in handy. It says until your next turn, creatures can't attack you. Remove Chronomantic Escape from the game with 3 time counters on it, and it's got suspend 3 for 2 and a white. So essentially, it prevents our opponents from attacking us every 3 turns. Now, on top of these spells, we've got some even more potentially effective ways at stalling. So let's go over them now in tactic number 7, Crystal Clear. First up, we've got some more wrath spells with Planar Outburst, End Hostilities, and Winds of Wrath. Planar Outburst is going to destroy all non-land creatures. End Hostilities is going to destroy all creatures and all permanents attached to creatures. And Winds of Wrath destroys all creatures that aren't enchanted and they can't be regenerated. For the most part, each of these are going to take out all creatures on the board. Some more effective ones though come with Fumigate and Rout. Fumigate's going to destroy all creatures and we gain 1 life for each creature destroyed this way. And then we can cast Rout as though it had Flash if we pay 2 more to cast it, and it's going to destroy all creatures that can't be regenerated. Finally, we've got 2 wrath spells that can help leave something behind for us with Kurtar's Wrath and Phyrexian Rebirth. Kurtar's Wrath is going to destroy all creatures and they can't be regenerated. On top of that, if we have Threshold, we get 2 1/1 white flyers. And then Phyrexian Rebirth is going to destroy all creatures and give us an XX where X is the number of creatures destroyed this way. But outside of board wipes, we're running some target removal too. So let's move on to tech number 8, Wipe Away. First up, running Forsake the Worldly, which is going to exile target artifact or an enchantment and we can cycle it for 2. Next up, there's Crush Contraband, which says choose 1 or both, exile target artifact or exile target enchantment. Next up, there's Oblation, which can get rid of pretty much anything. It says the owner of target non-land permanent shuffles it into their library, then draws 2 cards. This actually can be a pretty flexible card because we can choose our own non-land permanent to shuffle into our library so we can draw 2 if we want to. But let's say that we've dealt with our opponent's things and gotten both Bruna and Gisela out. What do we do after they've melded into Brisela? Let's find out in tactic number 9, Swing Big. First up, there's Run and War Club, which says equip creature gets +2/+1, and whenever a creature comes into play under your control, attach Run and War Club to that creature. And then Hero's Blade gives equip creature +3/+2, and whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield under our control, we can attach Hero's Blade to it. So both these equipment pump our commander and can attach to her for free. Briselda's power starts off at 9. Each of these get her power to 11 or even more. And when her power is at 11, it only takes 2 hits to kill an opponent. And then in combination with something like Fire Shrieker, we can turn that into a one-shot kill. Fire Shrieker says equip creature has double strike. So if Brisela has 11 power and she's got double strike, she hits for 22. Now Brisela does have flying, so she's going to get through a lot of the time. But also giving her trample can be a great way to ensure she gets some damage through. So we're going to be running Gate Smasher, Loxodon Warhammer, and 4 Bearer's Blade, which each essentially do the exact same thing for this deck. They each give Brisela +3/+0 and trample. Now Loxodon Warhammer gives lifelink and 4 Bearer's Blade gives vigilance, but Brisela already has those. But just giving +3/+0 and trample is well worth it. But we're not quite done with our equipment for this deck just yet. So let's move on to our final tactic, tactic number 10, Swing Fast. Haste can be crucial for this deck, so we're going to be running Haunted Cloak, Chariot of Victory, and Sword of Vengeance. Both Haunted Cloak and Chariot of Victory only have an equip cost of 1, and they also give trample. And then Sword of Vengeance does have an equip cost of 3, but it gives +2/+0, trample, and haste. Next up, there's Swiftfoot Boots, which gives hexproof and haste. That hexproof can definitely come in handy for any spells that our opponents have that cost more than 3 that want to target our commander. Some other effective ways to protect our commander come with Cloak and Dagger and Whispersilk Cloak. Cloak and Dagger is going to give +2/+0 in Shroud. And Whispersilk Cloak makes her unblockable on top of giving her Shroud. Now Brisela is definitely the key to victory for this deck, but with all this equipment, we can win with just Bruna if we need to. Regardless, this is a very unique and fun deck to play. Again, a huge thanks to Dakota for supporting this channel for over a year now. If you want to support this channel or want your own deck tech dedicated to you, consider becoming a patron. But now that we've gone through the spells in this deck, let's go on to the mana base. First up, there's Mirrored Landscape, which comes into play tapped and taps for color, so we can pay 2 and tap and sacrifice it to get 2 basic lands at the same time. Next up, there's Sequestered Stash, which you can pay 4 and tap and sacrifice it to mill the top 5 cards of our library, and we can put an artifact from our graveyard on top of our library. And then there's Rogue's Passage, which you can pay 4 and tap it to make target creature unblockable this turn. Next up, there's Cryptic Caves, which you can pay 1 and tap and sacrifice it to draw a card, but we can only activate this ability if we control 5 more lands. And then there's Nubenalia, which comes into play tap, but when it comes into play, we scry 1 and it can tap for a white. And then we're running 3 cycled lands with Secluded Steppe, Drifting Meadow, and Desert of the True. The rest of our mana base is very simple. We're going to be running 28 planes. And now that we've gone through every single card in this deck, let's do a quick price check. A quick reminder that our deck costs are calculated using TCGplayer optimization, optimizing with even heavily played and damaged cards because those cards need a home too. The average Bruna the Fading Light EDH rec deck is going to set you back $328.61. Our deck is going to be much more affordable, coming in at $49.22. Again, the price of this deck is the price that I got for it on the day that I'm recording. If you want to see a breakdown of this deck's cost, check out the link in the description. Keep in mind that prices can and will fluctuate and change over time. But with these deck costs, I want to be as transparent as I possibly can. Again, Commander's Quarters decks are about to be tuned and focused within their budget, but there are always ways that we can improve on them. So let's go through some reasonable upgrades now to see what some of those ways just might be. First up, let's add in Gaia Reach Sanitarium by taking out a Plains. Next up, let's add in Keening Stone by taking out Tamio's Journal. And then let's add in Mystic Forge by taking out Thran Tome. Next up, let's add in Endless Horizons by taking out Whetstone. And then let's add in Shield of Kaldra by taking out Cloak and Dagger. Finally, let's add in Darksteel Plate by taking out Gate Smasher. And now it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what you think about this deck and what you think about the commander in general. And make sure you're following us on social media for more updates and sneak peeks on future episodes. Again, a huge thank you to my patrons who help make this show possible. I truly couldn't do any of this without your support. If you want to support this channel directly, consider becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, including being able to vote on future commanders for deck techs. There are even tiers where you get your own personalized deck tech dedicated to you. You can check out all the Patreon tiers and rewards at patreon.com/commandersquarters. If you haven't already, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about budget commander. So while you're at it, go ahead and check out some of our other types of episodes. And with that, I'm out of here. Thanks again and have a good one.